Hey friends, my last journal is officially full and it is so very satisfying to see it all filled up. This means it's time for a brand new journal. I really love the fresh start feeling of opening a new journal, so let's get right on into this. This setup is for spring. The overall decorative theme that I'm going with is to match my channel and to match my philosophy. I'm going with the greenhouse theme. I started with the name page and the key. For the name page, I wanted something simple and open, almost like the entrance into the journal. And then on the opposite page, I set up my key. I wrote that out on a separate piece first, layered it onto background paper, which you'll see me size out here in a moment. And then at the end of it, I add some stickers after to make it a little more tucked into the spread. I really like starting a notebook this way because it sets the tone right away. It gives me a sense of entry, but it also gives me the basic visual language that I'll be using through the journal. Even though I like things to look decorated and layered, I still try to keep the system itself pretty simple. I don't want my journal to be so complicated that I need to decode my own pages later. I have in the past added too many extra things to the key, and I definitely found that I just didn't really use them. So I refined my key this time around so that it's a lot more functional based on what I actually use it for. Now, I do come back a little bit later and add some more stickers, and you might see them in the flip through. But overall, I think that this spread came together really nicely. Next, I make a pocket for my grid spacing guide. This is one of those practical little things that makes journaling so much easier later on. Having this spacing guide saves me from recounting everything over and over again every time I make a new spread. And I did get this spacing guide from a separate notebook at some point, but I find that it works across all of them, and I don't really need to remake my guide every time because this one has done really well for me for a long time. I started by sizing the background paper and then I cut the actual pocket space. If you'll notice, I cut this pocket space out of that annoying page that we usually just kind of glue to the page before it. I wanted to make it have some use instead of just being glued and a waste of paper. So I feel really happy with how this all turned out. Then I add tissue paper on top for a softer layered look, tape down the edges to finish it off. I like that even the functional pieces still match the theme. It still feels like part of the greenhouse instead of some random utility page interrupting the setup. And after that, I set up the index. I started drawing in the border first and then added a greenhouse window title area at the top. And you'll notice that I also do add the second line highlight underneath of everything. I really enjoy a second line highlight. It really makes it just easier to track between what's on the page and the number of the page. I have a really difficult time with having to go across every single time. So I love second line highlights. Plus, it just looks really pretty and brings everything together nicely. The index is one of those pages that doesn't really feel exciting at first, but it becomes more useful the more full the journal gets. I think that at the start of the notebook, it's easy to think that I'll remember where everything is. And then later, I'm flipping through. like I've never seen the journal before in my life. So I like building that structure in right away. It's especially with the bullet journaling system where you kind of add pages as you need them and not in a specific order. It is extremely helpful for me. And it helps me keep everything in one notebook rather than spreading things across multiple. I do have a couple of other notebooks for other things, but for the most part, I keep everything in this one. Then I moved on to the future log for the season. I started the same way I do with a lot of these pages, doing the border first, then the title, and then the actual layout. For the title for this one, I do use my stamps. I don't use them for all of them, but I did like how it turned out with this one. After stamping the title, I draw in the boxes and I add the titles on this little brown paper. This honestly turned out so much better than I expected it to. Afterwards, I did the plaid background. I did do it after putting in the stickers. I realized that I wanted to add it. So I do kind of lift the stickers in some areas as well as doing the brown around the borders. But really, the plaid background brings all of this together so very nicely. The future log is for March, April, and May, which is my preferred quarter. So it gives me a broader seasonal overview rather than detailed planning. I also tend to get, I don't like being locked into regular quarters. So this kind of gives me a better idea. Next is the quote page. This one is definitely more decorative and collage based, and it kind of acts as the emotional anchor for the setup. I like having one page near the front that sets the tone for the season, not just visually, but mentally too. This quote that I chose is one of my own personal quotes, and I think it fits really well with the way I think about growth and with the whole greenhouse idea in general. Growth is not just about effort, it's also about conditions. And I do go back after filming and add a couple of stickers from the potted plant PET tape, which just helps the page feel a little more full and finished and kind of lends more to that greenhouse atmosphere. After that, I set up my light levels page, which is one of the core pieces of my whole system. I start with the border, add the greenhouse window shape, and then I add what I consider a light key at the top, and then write out the rules and structure underneath. After that, I'll layer in the yellow plaid and stickers to finish it off. And this page is exactly how I think about energy and capacity in a more realistic way. Instead of expecting myself to function the same way every day, especially as a person who's neurodivergent and has chronic pain and severe demand avoidance issues, I use these light levels to reflect how much internal resource I actually have available. So, on a full sun, higher light day, I might be able to handle more demanding tasks. On a lower light day, I need things to be smaller, gentler, or more supportive. That shift matters a lot to me because I don't see lower capacity days as laziness or failure. I see them as information. If something feels hard to start, that usually means something needs adjusting. The size of the task, the clarity, the pressure, the conditions. Sometimes it's mindset, but I feel like everybody focuses almost entirely on the mindset piece of it. And I think that there is so much more to it, and mindset can be just a small part when a lot of the time the barriers go a lot deeper, particularly for people who are, like myself, neurodivergent or have additional struggles. And this page kind of helps me work with that instead of against it. Next, I'm setting up my trays page. Structurally, I set this one up the same ways I usually do, building the frame, the sections, the titles, and then the decorative details. I didn't fill in the trays on camera, but I still wanted to include the page because it's a really important part of how I plan. These are essentially categories of task options that I can pull from depending on my energy, the context, or the kind of support that I need that day. I also have at the bottom a rescue tray, which is especially important for me, and that's for the lowest capacity days. Days where I'm overwhelmed, drained, high pain, sick, anything where I'm just not feeling function like I'm able to do anything. I think more systems should have this built in because real consistency doesn't come from expecting yourself to perform perfectly all the time. It comes from having a version of the system that still works when things are hard. And for me, this is how I remind myself that it's okay to take these days to just take care of myself. Because if I just push through it, I end up burning myself out and getting in a cycle of burnout over and over and over again. And that's where I was for years before I created this system. And finally, I set up the goal greenhouse spread. This is evidently the inspiration for the theme for the journal as well as for this whole channel. This is the core of my philosophy. This is probably the page that ties everything together most literally. I start with the borders, add the greenhouse windows, and then I decided to put in some shelves. The shelves hold category titles and then the actual goals that I have within each section. And then finally, I'll add in the decoration. I designed this spread so that each shelf represents a different life area, and I only have a few key seasonal focuses of my goals on each shelf. The important thing for me here is that this is not every goal that I have. It's just what I'm actively tending to this season. In a separate place, I have all of my major goals written down. And this is an ever evolving list, but because of the demand avoidance, I can often end up almost avoiding my own desires and my own goals. This allows me to choose what I want to work on or what I feel motivated to work on for this season. And that's honestly been a huge game changer for me. So instead of trying to carry my entire future in one spread, this page helps me narrow down what actually matters right now, what needs care, what needs attention, and what I really just want to put on the shelf over these next few months. I really love how this one turned out because it feels structured but still warm and alive. Once the setup is done, you'll see what I mean. It really feels like looking into a greenhouse filled with different sections of life instead of just looking at a cold productivity tracker. And it gives it that vibe and that energy that makes me want to keep turning back to it and keep looking at it. And that balance is really what I'm always trying to create. Something beautiful enough that I want to come back to it and functional enough that it actually supports me when I do. So, this is my full spring greenhouse setup. I wanted this journal to feel like a little planning greenhouse, somewhere to hold priorities, track my energy, and keep the season visible in a way that feels supportive instead of stressful. For me, planning works best when it reflects real conditions, not just what I wish I could do on my best day, but what actually helps me to keep showing up across different kinds of days. That's a big part of why I keep coming back to the greenhouse metaphor, because growth is real, effort matters, and tending matters. But so do light, timing, and capacity. You can't shame a plant into thriving, and I don't think people are different. So here's the last flip through of the finished pages, and I'll see you in the next one.